Welcome to episode 32 of The Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. This week we look at motorcycles released at Milan's EICMA show. Joining me are ADVrider.com's managing editor Zac Kurylyk and Motorcycle Global's Michael Uhlarik. But before we dive in, a word from our sponsor. Picture this, you're halfway through a DIY motorcycle fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. But it's okay because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything, brake rotors, lights, and tire exhaust systems, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Let's jump into the deep end. Michael, what is EICMA?
EICMA is the world's most important, largest, but most significant motorcycle trade show. And it takes place in Milan, Italy, and it was originally, and to a large extent still is, set up by the Italian governing body for motorcycles and bicycles as a trade fair for all of the domestic manufacturers. And over 35-ish years, it went from a regional show that was really more about the bicycles when the Italian bicycle industry was very, very large. And, you know, local motorcycle producers when there were a lot more of them in the 80s and 90s into what it is today and what it's been really since the 1990s. Thanks in large part to the fact that it's in Italy, in Milan, and they put on a great show and it's a great city to visit. It was hugely attractive for foreign manufacturers, i.e. the Japanese, who dominate the motorcycle industry then and now, to launch their product. And a time before the internet. This was really important because the world's press descended on Milan for the aforementioned reasons. You know, there was Intermot in Germany, which was once upon a time far more significant. But you know, if a magazine has a limited travel budget at a time when journalists have to physically go to press launches, would you spend your budget going to Cologne in winter or to Milan in the fall? And I think that was the one key aspect to EICMA's success. And then as successive waves of developing nations grew their motorcycle industries, you know, initially Taiwan, then China, you know, and more lately India. When those foreign manufacturers decided, how do we enter the world stage? They didn't come to North America. They went to the world's most dynamic and profitable market, which is the EU. And they overwhelmingly chose EICMA because their supplier base are often, for European production, are in Europe. And it was just an easier, in EICMA, the organizers and the Italian government made that easy. And just to complete that, to complete the sort of significance and how it worked, back when Silvio Berlusconi was prime minister of Italy, you know, Italy, the Italian government and its you know, always put a lot of money since the 1950s into supporting domestic industry. But the Berlusconi government really turbocharged it at a time when domestic industry was in decline because they realized, okay, well, tourism is Italy's number one, business. We can combine the two. And they threw media assets at it, you know, Italy's largest television station. And they threw a lot of, at the time, radical ideas like making EICMA a fully online show badly, but they did it first at a time when Intermot, and to say nothing about the regional national shows in North America, Japan, etc., which should be said, nothing comes even close to significance of EICMA and Intermot. Then Intermot just started to look like a sad second-rate show. And eventually Intermot just became German industry, so KTM and BMW, and a small smattering of B-rate Asian companies would do their product launches there. Everything significant launches at EICMA.
Now, as we know, things have changed in the world since the internet, and we don't need to physically go places to see things the way we once did. So what has technology done in terms of changing EICMA? Does it still have the significance that it once did?
100%. So for those of you who have not been, EICMA is like the Super Bowl of motorcycling. And I'm not exaggerating. You go, like, there's a metro, like a subway metro line that takes you to the convention center where it takes place. This convention center is nothing like, there's no convention center in America like it. The Las Vegas Convention Center, sorry to say, but it is sad compared to the Milanese Convention Center. It has beautifully manicured gardens. It is vast. It has, I believe, 8 or 10 gigantic halls that are all interconnected. It's on a subway line. It's only 20 minutes from downtown. It is huge. And when you're on the subway and you're 2 hours before showtime, when you get to that last subway station, you have to wait in a sea of humanity like you were going to a Taylor Swift concert. And on opening day, it's all industry and press, and everybody's dressed up in either their liveried outfits or in suits and ties or whatever they're wearing, business attire. And it's a press of humanity to get out of the tube station, up the escalators, through your credentials, and into the show. And it stays that level of intensity the whole show. And because the public day is the next day, and because Italy is a little flexible with rules, the public starts infiltrating at the end of the first day because they bribe or cajole, or I don't know how they get through it, but you start seeing Italian teenagers with way too much gel in their hair. And you're like, I'm not sure you represent a magazine or a manufacturer. And it's just a press of humanity. And the first day, the press day is astonishing. It's exciting. It's really a thrill because there is a schedule. Each manufacturer is given a time slot, and a mob of journalists, which these days, so your question, how's the internet changed? Instead of it being motociclismo, motorrad, MCN journalists, they're there too, but it's influencers and bloggers, and they're all holding their steady phone, gyroscopic phone, cell phone stuff, and they've got the little, lavalier mics and their little mini, AV kits, and they're a press of these people, and they're, no pun intended, squeezing around the press launch, and it's 20 minutes of talking, curtains come off, fiddles, videos, and then, oh shit, we got to go to the next, to the next presentation, and they're literally running from one hall to the next. And that kind of energy just doesn't happen in trade shows, of any trade show I've ever been to. And I've been to, exciting trade shows about plastics and automotive lighting, things of this nature. But EICMA is really special. And the internet has only made it more so, because each display is not a bike on a stand. The stands are beautiful. They spend a lot of money on them. They create whole environments. Starting, like, Aprilia started this way back in the late 90s. They boxed off their whole show. So it was a show within a show that had never been seen before. You walked through 2 openings and you entered an Aprilia world with its own music, its own lighting, its own curation. And now, for 15 years, 20 years, Ducati does that, BMW do that, KTM to a certain extent. They bring in various environments for different styles of bike. It's like Disneyland. And I still get excited. I'm excited thinking about it, and I regret not being there, but life is what it is.
The Lowdown Show is presented by ADVrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Michael, of course, you are very fond of changes in motorcycling in terms of electrification. It's one of the things that Motorcycle Global, your company, comments on to a lot of your clients. And this Honda is being shown at EICMA. And my gosh, it's unattractive. What am I missing?
You're missing the greater context. Honda has been
teasing yet again.
I know. It's not attractive. No. This is not a concept of something that's going to be in production, although 100% the foundation, the guts of it are. Honda's not trying to tickle you, Neil. They know that they'll never, no, and I don't just mean you personally. The difference between this and an electric concept vehicle from just about anyone else is that, Honda's been doing the Japanese thing and teasing electric motorcycle concepts for 15 years. And that's what they call them, concepts. Because when they come out with a production vehicle, and they will, I mean, they already do make a lot of electric vehicles in Southeast Asia, it'll be cheaper, faster, more reliable, and just generally a superior product to anything else out there. And that is just how the motorcycle industry works. And all this disruption talk, which is mostly come from the United States, has turned out to be, just talk. Electric motorcycle startups in the U.S. have a 94% failure rate. That's not great.
Yeah, but
sorry, collapsed.
Only 94?
We have two companies that are in business. They're not making money. They've never made money, but they are still technically alive and shipping product. So it's 94.
Okay, so with this Honda, so what, concept vehicles are typically sort of flights of fancy. So what are they showing us here?
This is not intended for public excitement. This is a signal to the suppliers and to the shareholders that we're in this, we're coming. And, as I said, what people don't realize, because everybody lives in a silo, and this program is largely to the English-speaking world and the West and a little bit of, other countries. Honda's an automaker, and they're a top 10 automaker, and they make, a lot of other things. And they've been making production electric motorcycles in Southeast Asia. Yes, low speed, mopeds, that kind of thing. But they don't have recalls. They make money, and those products work really, really well. And Honda is the only incumbent Japanese company to brush off literally everyone else consistently for 50 years, including rising powers like Royal Enfield or, whomever. So this vehicle is meant to demonstrate to their partners and shareholders and interested parties in the public that we're working on this. And just like the NSX, when the first NSX came out in automobile world, nobody really took it seriously until, oh my God, this is the best supercar in the world. And Ferrari and Porsche looked really, really embarrassing at that point. And yeah, the auto enthusiasts turn their nose up. Who cares? It's 20 years later. Honda is still here. Honda is still making profit. Ferrari has had good years and bad years. The European and startup scene in the motorcycle space for electric vehicles, they come, they go, they wax lyrical, they make a big show. These guys are quiet. They present this, no hyperbole. Stylistically, I agree. It's not good. It's not even okay. It's pretty hideous and pretty amateurish. They did show another vehicle, electric vehicle, on the same package, which was a lot more interesting. But I'm just encouraged by the fact that they're working on it, because if anyone penetrates the electric motorcycle market, it'll be Honda and Yamaha.
Here's a bike that you're really excited about.
Indeed.
What is this?
Well, this is the Flying Flea from Royal Enfield, and this is evidence. I can't speak to the quality of the engineering. Nobody knows the price point, and nobody knows the technical specifications, and it doesn't matter. The tiny wheels, by that I mean narrow wheels, the delicacy of it. So stylistically, the design is phenomenal, but that's not what gets me excited. Royal Enfield has the only product planning department in the motorcycle world outside of Japan that actually understands motorcycling. And full disclosure, I happen to know a significant number of people there, and they're brilliant. And somehow they've convinced the management to listen to them. This is what the market wants. It's fun, it's interesting, it's beautiful. Because it's a Royal Enfield, it will be reasonably priced. The quality is good enough, and it's cool. And it doesn't matter that it doesn't go 200 kilometers on a full charge. It doesn't matter that it isn't fast or powerful. It's not trying to be. It's saying you can have fun on a motorcycle and not worry and have that, alternative power supply. If a 350 or a Himalayan or a Meteor or something like that isn't your bag, then you can get this. And I would get this if it was combustion powered. That is just the most beautiful thing I've seen come out of a motorcycle studio anywhere in 15 years. It's awesome.
Zach, do you want to add something here?
Yeah, it actually looks like a flying flea. I mean, they didn't just take the name. It looks like the original flying flea from World War II. I'm no fancy pants university educated designer.
You're
I
wearing
do
a
like it.
university jersey.
I am. Yeah, well,
But see, he mugged a guy and took it, Michael. That's the thing. That's the thing about
Okay.
Zach.
you got to look smart however you can. What I look at, I look at this bike. It looks great, except for the battery. I look at it and I really wonder if those fins on the battery case are there to make it look like a prop from Buck Rogers, or if they're actually functional. And in either case, do they drive up the price? Because that's been the biggest problem I think that electric motorcycles have had so far, more than anything else, is the price. But I appreciate that they made it look good and didn't just cheap out on it.
For our seventh inning stretch, some thoughts provided by our sponsor. Picture this: you're in the garage, your favorite room in the house, and you're tuning up your engine with parts you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease. And because you're committed to riding that thing further than the odometer can even handle, you start thinking to yourself, you know what? I could probably also use some new brakes, maybe a shock. This baby deserves an air filter. So you head right back to eBay. You can find any part you need there. It's unreal. From headlights to air filters to exhaust systems, all the way to those carbon fiber rims you've had on your mind. eBay is the stocked garage of your dreams. And you've got eBay guaranteed fit, because eBay knows DIY fixes can be major and mods are always intense. So you need to know those parts are guaranteed to fit every time. Before you dive in, wrench first. And on the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back. Simple as that. You know what you love more than your bike itself is riding it. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance and locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay. Minor fix or complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back on the road, and you've got eBay guaranteed fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info to get the exact parts that fit. When you see that green check, you're a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. So now that you know all that, imagine standing at that open garage door looking at that bike you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible, whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been on the road before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Now back to my conversation with Curly and Mo. This is something that really caught my eye, which really surprised me. It's a V3 Honda, and just presented in this form. I think all they said that it's intended for a larger motorcycle or a large-ish motorcycle, and it has not a supercharger, which is mechanically driven, or a turbocharger, which is exhaust driven, but a compressor for the engine that's electrically driven. And here's my question to you, Michael. First of all, what do you think of this? But secondly, why is Honda waiting till, the near end of internal combustion to finally show some interest in what's going on these days?
I may come across as a Honda fanboy, and I guess I am in my middle years, but it's a crushing demonstration of technological superiority. And they're doing it because Japan woke up. And allow me to step back and explain what I mean by that. People who watch this show may or may not follow the auto industry, and even if you do, you're probably stuck in your regional mindset. There was a Tokyo Motor Show last year, and Japan is the world's largest automaker is Japanese. The Japanese make 3 of the top 5 largest automakers. Everybody understands that they're big, but they have had a lean 15-20-year period where competition was just more exciting, and other things. They fell asleep on the electrification side, on cars, etc. There was a malaise. Well, last year in Tokyo, Godzilla woke up, and it was just one amazing demonstration of character, of design, of technology after another, and they all did. companies we laugh at and that we'd forgotten or we'd think of as just grocery getters just came out with confidence. Japan is confident again. They're confident geopolitically and they're confident economically in a way they haven't been since the 90s. Honda was there, and because they're an automaker. And this, coming back to this vehicle, this to me signals that, you know, and obviously they've worked on this for years. This is the motorcycle side of Honda saying, F you. You know, my bias is towards mechanical precision and truth. And, you know, the combustion engineering at Honda and Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki are simply superior. And the numbers and the facts bear that out. And you can argue with me semantically, but it's pretty hard to make a cogent argument. This is them saying, once more, let's just do this. The V3 exists because it's compact. It has the virtues of a V4 engine, but it's lighter. It can rev faster because there's less, reciprocal, because there's more faster than a twin, I mean, because the cylinders are smaller. And the electric compressor is just more space and energy efficient. A turbocharger is big and it has to spool up. And then, you know, this thing can just provide ideal boost at all times. And because the battery is small, there will be a battery. Lithium batteries are light. The rest of the time, it will just generate power the way traditionally. It means the airbox is way smaller than it would be that was the first thing I noticed for a motorcycle with this capacity, which means the design team, writ large, engineers and industrial designers, have way more freedom. That was what I immediately understood, is this is super compact and it'll have incredible high energy density. It'll be very lightweight. It's a Honda, so it'll, you know, outlive us all. And, you know, if this was presented by a European nameplate, then everyone would be agog, but it's Honda. So everyone's like, I don't get it. I'll have this. I don't care what it looks like. I'm buying whatever this is. This is going to be astonishing.
I imagine it as sort of and I don't know where I get this idea, but I imagine it as a sort of a VFR kind of sized bike. Do you think that's a good guess?
I think it will be the spiritual successor to the Fireblade. I think it'll be a all-out, flat-out final demonstration of super sport before the genre sails off. Because the way the swing arm is shaped and the tire selection, I don't think it's going to be casual use. I think this is going to be pretty hardcore.
Oh, really?
What about a Super Blackbird?
Also possible. Look, the most lucrative market in the world, even though it's teeny tiny, is the US market. And Americans love something that's the fastest, the most, fill in the blank. And Kawasaki's held that title with the H2R, and they did it in a brute force way. This is a very elegant engineering solution. And if the body is smart and it has other aero effects, then that could be a possibility.
Let's go to this. This is I'm gonna talk about this because I do have two partially disassembled Ducatis in the shed. So this is the new Panigale V2, and this is funny. Ducati, you gotta love them. You gotta drive you nuts. But for years and years, Ducati would go on about, no, it's not a V twin, it's an L twin, because of course it's 90 degrees, and of course they don't call this the L2, do they? It's the V2. I'll get over it eventually. But this is sort of interesting. So this is an all new engine, V twin. What is it? 890 cc, I think, roughly. And but this replaces the Super Quadro, which used to be it was the downscaled version of the big Superbike V twin. But this engine has about 30 horsepower less than the Super Quadro, and it's got valve springs, not the Desmo system. And it looks like, it's got chain-driven overhead cams. It kind of looks like an SV650 engine. So what's the thinking, do you think, between bringing out a new motorcycle that, of course, won't be 30% less than the previous one, but that has less power? Because for years and years, we're used to this thing where it's, 2 kilograms lighter and 4 more horsepower. And that's kind of the thing that's existed, forever.
Well, I think they actually knocked quite a bit of weight off this bike. I know that their marketing, for whatever it's worth, they said that this thing will get around one of the superbike tracks. I forget which one. They said it would do lap times very close to the previous model because it was so much lighter, even though it had a lot less power. From my perspective, I'm completely ambivalent because it's a super bike, and the only place that I would ever ride one of these things is at one of those arcades, where you have the machine that.
And as far as I know, there is no gun rack option. So yet another.
Well,
reason
wait. When they put it in the Matrix, the next Matrix film, there might be one in that.
What do you think, Michael?
Can you tie a milk crate on the back seat?
In
Zach,
New Brunswick,
would you put a milk crate on the back seat?
You can get a milk crate on anything in New Brunswick.
You probably put a couple on the sides too if you had to. Just zip tie them right to that fairing.
Oh, beautiful. I love that kind of engineering. Michael, what do you think?
So I'll explain what happened. There are laws in most countries, and those laws require engines that burn combustibles to, have less and less particulate emissions, less and less noise, and to be more efficient. Yes, I know a lot of people who are still listening are going to be, the greeny agenda. Look, you don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it, but it's the law. And the largest countries in the world and the largest markets in the world, China, India, Europe, and yes, even the United States, have these emission guidelines. And even if the United States throws them out, it doesn't matter. Companies build bikes for a global market. You cannot keep adding horsepower without consuming more energy. That's just physics. And so this slide, we do it with clever engineering and high cost. But the reality is that, there's a reason why the 600cc sport bikes went from 600 to 650. And it wasn't for the marketing. It was because a 599cc Japanese inline four was losing power to comply with each new, EU2 Bharat 2, EU3 Bharat 3, EU4 Bharat 4. And they're all in lockstep. So Ducati has to do the same things, or they can't sell these bikes in most of the world's markets. That's why the exhausts are so big, and there's 2 pre-chambers, not 1. Why there's hoses everywhere. Why the fuel tank is so tall, because underneath it is the world's biggest airbox. Going back to that Honda, you see what I'm getting at? Honda approaches this problem from engineering first perspective. Ducati, BMW, the other pretenders, and I'm sorry, that's kind of what they are. When you sell 100,000 bikes a year, in Ducati's case, 60,000 bikes a year, you're a boutique. They don't have those resources. They can't do it. So they do the conventional thing. And you're absolutely right. They copied a Japanese engine because they're smart. Chain-driven cams are more reliable, and cheaper to produce. And yes, Ducati, yes, they're expensive, but they are owned by serious people now who are looking at the bottom line. They're looking at the top line. And they're saying this engine is too expensive to produce. So cost cutting. And that's happening everywhere across the board. So that's why the design is the way it is. That's why the single-sided swing arm is gone. It's cost. Okay, they'll tell you it's for this and that. Everybody wants a single-sided swing arm. I'm sure they can do it, but it's more expensive. So, cheaper rim, cheaper axle. There are some technical reasons as well. So, that's why it ended up this way. And let me just say, aesthetically, this looks like a Chinese electric motorcycle that you get on Alibaba for $2,000. It's awful. I'm sorry. Like, the surfacing is beautiful, but I don't know what's going on in Bologna.
Zach, what are we looking at here?
One of the new KTM 390 series adventure bikes. The theme of EICMA this year was 450 adventure bikes. I'm not quite sure why. Michael could probably elucidate or explain on that one, I guess. But KTM brought its updated 390s. I think there's 5 or 6 models in the lineup. And then mysteriously, they never sent out, at least as of supper time on Thursday, they hadn't sent out any information on them. They posted a few pictures, but we're all in the dark about what's going on with these bikes. I half wonder if they've laid off a bunch of PR staff that were supposed to be there and tell us all about them. I don't know.
Good question. I don't know. Michael, what do you think?
So on the latter, I'm 100% telling you that it's crisis time at Peer Group. 100%. This was just, you didn't get your press release equipment information because of a snafu. Somebody screwed up, and it's probably because of what's going on. And for those who are not, those at home not following, the parent company of KTM, MV Agusta, Gas, and a bunch of other whatever companies in Europe, Husqvarna, has lost 40% of its income, and it's lead balloon time. So heads are rolling, and it's not a good time to be in that company, in that organization. As far as why is it 450, it's the same thing. Why is the new R7s, R1 is a 900? This is the same thing. It's emission controls. How do you create a power level and a performance level that the customer is willing to accept? The cheap way is add displacement, because it's a relatively low cost way to boost power. Well, it is the lowest cost way to boost power. Otherwise, a 300cc today will be less performant than a 300cc 2-3 years ago.
And the consumer also is pretty excited because their 1290 is now a 1390.
Correct.
Going back to this here bike, I have a lot of miles on the 390 series. I've ridden them all over the East Coast. I was actually quite excited to see this design. I think this is a really great looking bike. It looks way better than the previous models. I don't know which exact submodel this is. They have, I think, 3 or 4 submodels. But whatever it is, this is the sort of thing that KTM's customers want. The people who are looking at the 390, this is way more off-road ready than the previous 390 Adventure. I would like to try it. I'm excited to get a ride on it when it comes out, if that's possible next summer. I think a lot of the adventure bike space is turning towards these smaller machines for various reasons, but a lot of it comes down to cost. These bikes offer almost the exact same electronics package as the bigger bikes. They have leaning sensitive traction control, leaning sensitive ABS. They have all that stuff, and quick shifter even. And they come in at a price half maybe of the 1390 and significantly under the 890 and 990 as well. These bikes are going to sell like crazy for KTM if they can get them into showrooms over here.
The Lowdown Show is presented by ADVrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Since we were talking about Kisa is, of course, the company that designs KTM motorcycles. And Kisa will not stop until every KTM looks like a mosquito at 50,000 magnification. And you got to hand it to them. They forge on unrelentingly. And this is not an unattractive motorcycle. It may be galling, but it's not really unattractive. I see what they're trying to do. There used to be this English television series. It was animated, and one of the characters, all his internal body organs, or like his liver and heart, were on the outside of his body. And this is what this reminds me of. It's like the fuel pump is between your knees. It's like everything that you're not supposed to see is on the outside.
Well, I have 2 comments on this, and I'm not a motorcycle designer, nor do I play one on a podcast or television.
Yeah, I'm going to add here that Michael's he's just a guy on Day Pearl. And that's what this is totally what it's about. Sorry, Zach.
But when I look at this thing, first of all, if I was to see this on the street, parked in front of my local watering hole, which around here is an actual watering hole.
It's an actual hole full of water. Oh, you know what? It pisses me off that you got that out before I did, because that would have been my chance to take you out of the knees.
But if I saw it, my first reaction, looking at the headlight, would be, that poor guy. He lost the bodywork around his headlight.
If the Kiska KTM that we just looked at is a little bit edgy, this is very much less edgy, and this is the Moto Guzzi, of course, which I think is a pretty bike. You and I, Michael, have never discussed this Guzzi, but I kind of like the look of it. But this one is noteworthy for one thing, which is its name. And Zach, do the honors, will you?
Yes, this is the new wind tunnel edition. You know, I'm not sure what exactly is in a name, but I would love to hear their marketeer explain that one.
Oh, I can tell you, Zachary, I can tell you. Guzzi was, and Michael, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but Guzzi was, I think, one of the first, or perhaps the first motorcycle manufacturer, the first with an actual wind tunnel, and you can visit it if you go there in Italy. And yeah, so but it's a bizarre thing to tout the wind tunnel on a motorcycle that I don't know. Is the wind tunnel still in use?
I don't know, but I can say this: if we're going to start naming our bikes after our, the tools we used to build them 100 years ago, things are going to be, they're going to get pretty silly.
Hang on, I've got it. The Harley Davidson Anvil.
The Indian hammer and tongs.
Perfect. The KTM cam test bed.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Do you know much about the wind tunnel at the Guzzi, Michael?
I know it's inoperable. Like it's first of all, wind tunnels are like any other technology. They were cutting edge, in 1920. That tunnel, it's not just, here's a giant fan in a room with the circulation. Like wind tunnel technology has moved on and on and on, and it is a very fluid dynamics, and the application and study of fluid dynamics is very sophisticated. And you do digital and like simulation plus physical testing, and tunnels now are heinously expensive, which is why you rent them. You rent tunnel time, unless you're Honda, in which case you just have your own, or Yamaha, which goes to Mama Toyotas. So this bike definitely never saw a wind tunnel, except for superficial things that all bikes get tested for. So every serious motorcycle manufacturer does some tunnel time, even if it's a cruiser and it's a naked bike. You're just testing for comfort. You don't want dirt find out where the dirt collects, in the back. And you can do these. If you've ever washed your motorcycle, or happened across strange little plastic surfaces that don't seem to make sense, like a matte black flap that's this big and it's in a strange place, you go, wonder what that's for? It's a weird styling thing. It's 99% of the time, it came out during that wind tunnel final pre-production testing, where it's like, we noticed that is a weird buff and it causes it hits the shoulder or a knee, or it causes unnecessary moisture or dirt deposits. So you do these little deflectors and things. So this bike, other than that kind of testing, definitely had no aerodynamics testing for efficiency. But I do agree with you, Neil. I think it's very nicely proportioned. I think other than the mirrors, it's very nicely designed. Like I think it's quite beautiful. My only criticism of it is the CMF, color material fabric. The graphic design graphic design is a discipline that Italy never cultivated. Like if you're in Italy and you look at billboards and advertising and signage, it's atrocious. And the CMF on this is brutal, like that black gold thing, and it's supposed to be a callback to the V7 and the 850, like whatever. Just make it red. Put the logo on the tank. But other than that, I think it's very beautiful.
All right, Zach, you're going to take the lead on this one. What are we looking at? It's yellow, so I presume it's a Suzuki.
Yes, yellow is, of course, the most beautiful color for any motorcycle. And here we see it on a Suzuki DRZ for our American readers or listeners, DRZ 4S, although here in Canada and in other civilized countries, it will be known as the DRZ 4S. This is a update of the old Suzuki DRZ 400 Dual Sport. And I would like to point out, actually, that ADVrider was one of the very first places to say that this was coming, and we were proven right. So this is a model that Suzuki's had in their lineup since 99 or 2000. Hadn't made any changes except for the usual, we replaced the base gasket with a metal one or something like that, or, we replaced this screw with a different bolt. It had not changed.
So hang on a second. So why didn't Suzuki call this the Suzuki DRZ base gasket?
Well, maybe they should have. But the point is, this was unchanged for a long time. They had a lot of faithful fans and followers who wanted a new one. They wanted two things. They wanted a 6-speed transmission. They wanted electronic fuel injection. And they only got one of those things. I'll let you guess which one it was.
Fuel injection.
They got
Base
fuel
gasket.
injection. Base gasket. They probably did get a base gasket too. So immediately the outrage was, hey, this motorcycle, it's got ride-by-wire throttle. It's got, different ride modes. It's got ABS. It's got fuel injection, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to improve suspension. But I want my 5-speed gearbox. And the dual sport enthusiasts of ADVrider have enough Facebook forum groups or Facebook groups. They have erupted in a cacophony of protests saying, I need my 6-speed. Never mind that Suzuki says that the 5-speed in this has been redesigned. What that actually means, we're not sure.
I love that. We've redesigned a transmission. What does that mean? The gears are wider? Ratios are different?
Well, I almost certainly bet you that the gear ratios are changed, because if you're going to go to the difficulty of changing the gears and revising the transmission, I'm sure they did make it a more wide ratio gearbox. Maybe not. But either way, people have ridden these things all over the world. When I started dual sport riding and adventure riding out here in the East Coast, the big thing to do was to go ride around the Trans-Labrador Highway. And one of the bikes that people took was this here 400. And its 5-speed transmission got it around a long haul trip like that just fine. If you go on YouTube, you'll see Barry Morris of Cross Training Adventure. He's ridden these things all over Australia. So the 5-speed, as it was, I will admit, they're buzzy bikes on the highway, but it worked. Suzuki says it's decreased the rev or the vibration rather in the machine. So even if they only kept the same ratios, it's quite possible there's less vibration. But my suspicion is they've probably updated that as well, although I haven't been told either way.
It's a cost issue.
100%, because it's what Kawasaki did with the KLR when they updated that.
It's also Neil asked, what can you redesign in a transmission? Well, if it works, you do nothing. So people who are not in engineering, and I'm not an engineer, I learned this from engineers. Transmission systems are incredibly difficult to make. Possibly the most difficult thing in a combustion engine system. ZF, the company, it specializes in mechanical transmission systems. They actually started off as a Zeppelin company. That's what the Z stands for. They pioneered transferring mechanical power from engines to propellers on Zeppelins, on blimps. And they built an empire on that. Once you acquire that skill and you create something that's reliable, you don't mess with it. And I'll give you a great example that I know personally. So one of these bikes that I own is a 1976 Yamaha XS 750. It's a shaft drive. It was Yamaha's first shaft drive. The shaft assembly, so not the shaft itself, but the where it changes direction and goes into the axle, is the same as a 2026 FJR 1300. They did a lot of things wrong on that XS back in 1975, and they wrecked this. It was a 5-speed, and second gears often broke on it. It was one of the reasons why that model failed in the marketplace. They corrected it in the 850, and that transmission or parts of it are still in production, because the amount of forces that go through transmission, even on a small engine, single cylinder motorcycle like the Suzuki, and the vibration and the twist and the torque, it's brutal. And getting it right so that it's reliable and oil tight and doesn't bind and goes on with no maintenance for that long is tough. So my guess is that Suzuki's system works. They looked at the cost benefit analysis. They are not selling a lot of these DRZs globally. It's really a North American phenomenon. And so they said, all right, you guys get this cheap stuff. Digital fly-by-wire throttle is actually inexpensive. But re-engineering, adding a sixth gear to this ancient motor, which we can't sell legally anywhere after 2030, forget it. You get your 5-speed, maybe they change the gear ratio and, new base gasket. So that's the reason.
One thing to point out is that this bike actually will be Euro 5 plus legal. It hasn't been legal in Europe since Euro 3, but they will sell a pile of these things as long as they're able to get them into Europe, because there's no other bike like this in Europe right now. There's smaller Japanese.
They're Chinese.
They're Chinese, yeah. There's smaller Japanese dual sports, the 300s, but there's no, and I think the only one that's there from Japan is the 300 Honda, I believe. I don't think Kawasaki is sold there. I could be wrong, but this is the only decently grunty thumper that comes from Japan to Europe, and they'll buy a ton of them because people in the UK want to go down to Morocco and ride around in a bike that won't break down, and that's what that bike will do, with or without a 6-speed.
Speaking of base gaskets, what's this?
That is what could possibly be the world's most universal dual sport bike, now with reconfigured suspension, finally, after 12 years.
So was it just, I don't know if I've ridden one of these, but I have no recollection of it. So what was the suspension, just overly soggy?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've ridden one with a stock fork and shock. We had one of these when I was with CMG. It's a Honda, for those who aren't watching but are listening, this is a Honda CRF 300L. This has been in production since I think 2012 or 2014.
11.
Yeah, around that era anyway. And ever since day one, the suspension's been a bit crap on it, at least in my opinion. The one that we had at CMG, we put Racetech fork internals and a Racetech shock on it. It completely transformed that bike, and I wish I'd bought it when we were done with it. It was an excellent motorcycle. People are riding these all over the world. They're taking them. Steph Jevons took one to Antarctica a few years ago in the 250 model, but a lot of them are having to reconfigure the suspension or set it up differently when they buy it. This one hopefully will be better. Having said that, when I was out at Traction E-Rag in August, those guys have a fleet of dirt bikes, but they also have a fleet of these. And they were riding these all over the place with no problems on stock suspension. But I will note that the guys at Traction E-Rag are actual good riders, and the people who buy these, a lot of them are not good riders. So they will benefit from having better suspension.
This seems like a perfect opportunity for me to jump in with a theory of mine. And it's one of the things that is self-evident, really, when you think about it. But every little bike, every economy bike, or every small displacement motorcycle is always hobbled by shitty suspension. My wife had an RC390 KTM. Sump pump aside, great little bike, quick enough, handled really well. But the suspension, I mean, $40, right? I mean, that's what they spent on the suspension. And yet, you just think of it. If people, of course, we won't do it, but every larger motorcycle has better suspension. Every less expensive bike, every smaller displacement bike, ergo cheaper, has poor suspension. But if you put, and I've ridden a few bikes like this, a few dirt bikes and some road bikes that have actually had really good suspension, and it actually changes your view on small motorcycles, because so much of what we perceive as a little bike being kind of shitty is really just inexpensive components in the suspension. Am I right there, Michael?
I mean, you're right about people with expertise. So my pushback for both of you is, I know you've been riding since the Stone Age, and Zach has been to the moon and Mars and back, and yeah, we're all heroes. Let's remember that most people in the world who ride motorcycles do not have the benefit of comparing different models. They will ride what they've got and maybe a friend or a colleague's bike. They are also not like, my complaint, my pushback on this is, people will listen to this and go, oh, I listened to that podcast. Oh, but that CRF's great, except for the shitty suspension. It is not. Like, that is just objectively a lie. The suspension. No, I'm sorry. It is. I peddle in truths. That's literally what I sell on. And there's a reason why this is the best-selling dual sport in the world. And before anyone goes, yeah, but I'm doing special things. As Zach pointed out, people have done far more dangerous extreme motorcycling. People ride this in volcanic back roads in Indonesia that have not seen maintenance in this century, and it's overloaded, and it hasn't seen oil changes, and the fork oil is half missing, and the thing doesn't bottom out and it doesn't fail. And so my point being, what are we talking about? Oh, those little bikes, they're so let down by bad suspension. What do you want? So here's what you get. You can buy your KTM or gas, or if it's a street bike, your Aprilia, and get a small displacement vehicle with cutting edge components, and it costs as much as a 600 or 750. And the market is tiny, and we all have the circle jerk. Oh, it's so amazing. And they lose money and go bankrupt. And the cycle is ever thus. Or we make really good, competent motorcycles for 99% of users who buy this and go, I'm having the time of my life. And then go and buy another motorcycle. And then 10 years from now become the same jerks that we all are in the enthusiast circle and go, oh, that's so lame. You want a $5,000 US dual sport that's 300 cc's that'll outlive the cockroaches after the apocalypse, that looks good, runs, doesn't break a camshaft, can go to the Arctic Circle? There it is. And if you want to put aftermarket parts like CMG did, great, you can. But, if you want experienced level perfection, then you're going to get your two-stroke European weird-ass dual sport that's got no support, and, it's a scalpel, and in the hands of a genius can do amazing things, but this will do 9/10 of that for half the price. So I don't know. How are we criticizing this? And it's not I'm a Honda fanboy. I'm a fanboy of reality. I can ride this, and I don't feel the distinction between this and good suspension. And I don't think I'm a bad motorcyclist. And I live in Nova Scotia. We have the worst roads on the planet.
Come across the bay, you'll find out otherwise.
So what Michael is saying is, he's saying just get a little kitty going, put some money aside for a shock. Everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I mean, that's what I did with my DR650, and it was perfect after that. So
now, is this we're looking at, I believe it's Kawasaki, but is this a Kawasaki camper? What is this we're looking at here?
This is what I call a desperate attempt by a marketeer to think outside the box, perhaps because they weren't given a product they could actually show. So they thought, we'll build this crate around this motorcycle to show it off. Actually, I actually have to give them props. This is probably an extremely cost-effective way of teasing this bike, which is a bike that ADVrider inmates have been asking for a long time.
What do we think it is, Zach?
It's a KLE. It's probably a KLE 500 based off the 450 twin that Kawasaki is using in its Ninja 500, Z500. And ever since the first Versys X 300 came out, so that's 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, the Versys X 300 came out, which is kind of a small adventure bike, has I think a 21-inch front wheel, and it was like a mini KLR almost. And it was based on the same platform as the Ninja 300, which was a pretty good bike when it came out. But then Kawasaki brought out the Ninja 400, and people said, well, I want a Versys X400, because if you built the 300 off the same platform as the Ninja, then it only makes sense that when the 300 Ninja becomes the 400 Ninja, that the 400 or the 300 Versys X adventure bike now becomes the 400 adventure bike. And people have been asking
Sorry,
for this.
Zach, who's on first?
If you go on the ADVrider forum, people have been asking for a adventure bike based on their latest platform of their budget sport bike for a long time.
It's a 500 parallel twin.
Yeah. So it looks like they've skipped
Michael's favorite engine configuration. But what's it say on the side of the box? Does life's a failure? What does that say? No, but seriously, I can't read it. Can you read it?
I think it says "Life's a rally, ride it." I think.
I thought it was an F. Okay, okay.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be riding many rallies with that low mount front fender. It's going to collect rocks and mud and split and then spew back in your face.
I have a theory, and I think it'll shock you.
Well, I actually have seen that same. I've seen that same drawing you're talking about, and you could be right.
What's your theory?
Okay, so first of all, this is a radio show as well as what the picture is that Kawasaki presented a tease where a heavily disguised motorcycle is breaking out of a crate, and you can't see much other than the front wheel and a hint. And then it's covered in all sorts of marketing stuff. My theory is this is a hybrid. Kawasaki Heavy Industries has leaned into this. Now, they've been building hybrids for a long time because they make attack submarines. And those of us who know things about the Navy, the submarines have always been hybrids. They use battery power underwater and, snorkel when they're in open air to generate power, or if they're not nuclear. Kawasaki has really been leaning into this on their motorcycle tech, and everyone's laughing and it's a failure. That's not how Japanese people think. They look at a 25-year time horizon, and their approach is, we make combustion technology, and Kawasaki particularly, his approach is, we're not going to do pure electric. We're going to hybridize, and we're going to do on two wheels what Toyota did on four, and buy ourselves 15, 20 years of market leadership. Because nobody else is doing this well. Piaggio did it first, but they did it badly. So my feeling, based on that fender that Zach was talking about, based on the little bit I can see on patent drawings, I think this is a 300cc combustion bike with a mild hybrid system where, it can bring the emissions. It'll have the performance of a 450cc bike, but half the particulate emissions, which means they'll be able to do this profitably, long after EU6, Bharat 6 go into enforcement. And, it has military applications of that as a result, because it can run silent. It means it can go into ULEZ zones. For people who don't know, that's a lot of cities around the world are making it that you can't go into urban centers unless it is a partial zero emission vehicle or fully zero emission vehicle. Again, you don't have to agree with this, but it exists. It's a thing. And these are cities with tens of millions of people in them. So I think it's a hybrid.
So to be sorry, Zach. So to be in say 300cc parallel twin with a
10
smallish battery
motor. Yeah, a small battery that is boosted from the combustion engine, and then it has a 5-10 kilowatt, 10, 12 horsepower electric motor to augment that.
Now, Michael, from what you know about this in a motorcycle application, does the actual the internal combustion engine actually drives the wheel as well? It's not just there to charge a battery.
Correct.
Gotcha. Zach?
I think it very well could be a hybrid. I also think there could be a hybrid and a gasoline version coming. We did see patent drawings a few weeks back that had a chassis that looked like a KLE chassis that I believe was a hybrid. I wrote the story up, but it was about 2 months back, and I can't remember exactly what the deal was. I have to look it up. These days in the internet business, you have to have a memory that can go back about a month, but any more than that, it's wasted space. As Michael pointed out, bike that can go into a zero emission zone is a big deal in Europe, because if I have a new
India
GS
and China, yeah,
sure, but we're at EICMA here. So if I have GS 1300 or whatever it's going to be next, 1500, 1800, and I can't take it to the office because the office is a zero emission zone, how will I show to my friends and coworkers how cool I am? But if I have a KLE that can ride in there on electric power and not get a $50 fine or whatever the fine is for going through a ULE zone these days, Kawasaki could have a niche product, but a very desirable product if you're in that niche.
And law enforcement will love it. And, yeah. It is, you're right, Zach. EICMA is in Europe, but EICMA is a global show. A lot of products are shown at EICMA that are never going to be for sale in Europe. The fact that it's in Italy is immaterial to what's being presented. But yeah, you're right. In Europe, where most adventure bikes, the biggest adventure they have is navigating traffic. That's a very important point. That GS 1300 can't go into central London without paying. It's not a fine, but paying essentially like a fee, a daily.
A sin tax. Let's call it what it is. It's a sin tax.
In closing, a word from our sponsor. Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY motorcycle fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. But it's okay, because whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brake rotors, lights, entire exhaust systems, whatever you need. And it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. eBay. Things people love. Thank you for listening to The Lowdown Show.